Okay, so thank you for joining. I see that we have 30 people on the call, so we'll get started, okay? So first of all, good morning to everyone and welcome to today's exciting fireside chat. We're here to learn a bit about the dynamic world of Bitcoin and exploring how leading entrepreneurs are navigating its complexities. As we know, it's a very difficult industry where there's a lot of innovation happening right now. This session will be a conversation, not a lecture, and we'll be joined by two industry titans. First of all, we have Piero Coen, the CEO of Osmo, who is a great friend, someone who I admire a lot. And we also have Arthur Linares, CEO of Cannabolt, who is also a great friend who I admire a lot for what he's doing in the cannabis industry. I really think that both of these entrepreneurs have navigated remarkable success. And it has been easy because they have had a lot of curveballs thrown at them by obviously the dynamic nature of what's happening in Bitcoin, also the cannabis industry in terms of what Arthur has been going through. And I'm thrilled that they can share with you guys what it's like to be an entrepreneur within these markets, which in my opinion are extremely difficult markets. So to get started, I'll allow them to introduce themselves and tell you guys a little bit about what they're doing in their respective projects. And we'll get started off with Piero. So Piero, welcome. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your project Osmo, please?
Hi, good morning. It's an honor to be here. My name is Piero Coen. I am from Guatemala, and I'm the CEO and co-founder of Osmo. Osmo is your app to buy Bitcoin in Central America. So it's the easiest and cheapest way to buy, sell, spend, send, and remit Bitcoin specifically. But the big vision is to become a banking alternative because about 70% of the population doesn't have access to financial services. It is exclusively cash-based. And we know that with Bitcoin integrating or mixing Bitcoin into local fiat rails, we can help these people have access to financial services. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Piero. And I would like to ask you a question. One of the things that I've seen that is very difficult in your space is that you've almost made Osmo a bit of a religion. People feel that moving to this new financial way of doing things has liberated them from constraints as moving money, both in terms of time and cost, and being able to send money from one place in the world to another to people that have Osmo or haven't Osmo, and that's a big game changer for them. Can you tell us a little bit more about the Osmo community and how you've been able to create that fanatic consumer base that is helping you guys grow so much?
Yeah, sure. I think there's a couple of things we've done in order to create what we call super fans. And the first one is to draw a clear line in the sand and understand what we are good at and what we want to be good at, and also understand that we can't please everybody. So very early on, our clear line in the sand was that we were going to be a Bitcoin only company, because with so many, over 20,000 cryptocurrencies in the world, it's very easy to get distracted. But our clear line was to focus on Bitcoin to bring financial inclusion to people who have been historically excluded from the financial world. And once you create, understanding that you can't please everybody, and once you create this clear line in the sand and know what you stand for, and if you share that with your customers, it starts resonating with them, and then they understand why you're doing what you're doing, and it allows for them to also share and spread the word. So, an example I think most of us will understand is Whole Foods. Whole Foods has a very clear line in the sand. They don't sell Coca-Cola, they don't sell Doritos. If you want Coca-Cola and Doritos, don't go to Whole Foods. But what they've created is this super fan base of people that are diehard fans of Whole Foods because they know where they stand. So taking a couple lessons learned from Whole Foods, we knew very early on that our clear line in the sand was going to be Bitcoin. But once you understand what your line in the sand is, then the next step is to share it with people, share it with your users, share it with your customers, share it with all the stakeholders, so that again they understand why you're doing what you're doing. Yeah, I hope that answers the question.
For sure, and congratulations on being such a good storyteller. I think that one of the successes of Osmo has been having a storyteller like yourself that is able to make people understand very quickly what the mission is, who the bad guys are, maybe not bad guys, but who the bad regulators are, and what you want to achieve, which is ultimately financial freedom. So thank you for that, Piero. Now, Arthur, I would love for you to share your story about how you're navigating two very difficult landscapes in the cannabis industry and in the Bitcoin industry as well, and share your story about how you got started and where you are now, please.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. I'm Arthur Linares, and founder of Cannabolt. And Cannabolt's goal is to bring Bitcoin banking, Bitcoin payments, and Bitcoin rewards to the entire cannabis industry in the US. Our view is that there are two giant industries in their infancy, Bitcoin and cannabis. And Cannabolt's job is to allow those two industries to intersect and benefit and converge and benefit from each other. And so I own a large cannabis business. We have one of the largest farms in North America, manufacturing facility, and dispensaries. And so we're utilizing Cannabolt with our own business to prove it, to work out the kinks, to make sure it works, to reward our customers in Bitcoin instead of points, to allow our customers to use Bitcoin to pay for products rather than the cumbersome banking system that is especially difficult in the cannabis space. In cannabis, because of the 1970s U.S. Bank Secrecy Act, traditional banking are not available to cannabis companies, so you deal in cash. Also, cannabis entrepreneurs get their bank accounts shut down just for being in the industry. And this is exactly the use case for Bitcoin. What we're finding is a lot of cannabis experts, they're cannabis experts, they're not Bitcoin experts. And so Cannabolt is designed to help bridge them into the Bitcoin space. Like Piero, and Osmo, I believe in Bitcoin. I think every CEO's major question, whether they know it or not, is how they adopt Bitcoin in their business. When I went through the Wolf Accelerator out of New York City with the Osmo team, the Ross Stevens, the CEO of Stone Ridge, spoke to our group. And he said the biggest challenge, the most important question that a CEO has, how to adopt Bitcoin. It's the Excel spreadsheet of our generation. And so you have companies like Osmo, companies like Cannabolt that are helping other businesses adopt Bitcoin, other people. And I just want to thank Singular making it easy for us to do that.
Thank you, Arthur. And we'll discuss in a second how, because regulation and financial limits on creating a crypto application are obviously very difficult. You belong in two industries that are being very highly regulated and limited, which is the cannabis and the Bitcoin industry. So I can't wait to hear about that. So thank you, Arthur. So moving on, guys. One of the things that I most respect about these two entrepreneurs is that they're dealing with a lot of challenges, not just from a technical standpoint of implementing Bitcoin, but both regulatory and market challenges, such as how to get these tools into the hands of consumers in a way that's easier than current tools allow them to. And we all know the power about crypto. But what I respect the most about these entrepreneurs is their ability to adapt and thrive in these fast-paced industries. Their ability to deliver a seamless user experience that have kept customers engaged, both with the retail locations for Arthur and obviously the digital experience for Osmo. How they've been able to drive innovation and develop cutting-edge solutions from challenges, and how they've been able to lead teams that are highly, highly driven through a single vision to achieve business growth. So I'm going to ask a couple of questions for you guys, and hopefully the audience can write down their questions in the chat, so at the end we can get back to them and answer those questions, okay? So I'm gonna go first with Piero. So Piero, under your leadership, Osmo has been able to leverage Agile and Flutter to, in my opinion, create a best-in-class Bitcoin application. Just this weekend I was in El Salvador and I bought 2 coffees with Osmo, and that seemed like the future because it was so easy, so natural, and so efficient. But can you tell us a bit about how you were able to adapt to this ever-changing regulatory landscape and all of the market fluctuations within the Bitcoin space, please?
Sure. It's definitely a roller coaster. Some days you think like, wow, it's going great, and then all of a sudden there's a curveball. But several things that have definitely helped have been, one, having an amazing team, and a team that is committed to what we're building and to bringing financial inclusion to our region in Latin America. So having a team that really believes in what we're doing is first and foremost, the most important thing to navigating this never-ending roller coaster. And the second I'd say is having a team that can pivot quickly and act very fast. And obviously, by using a methodology like Agile, we can move very fast because we're not a huge company. So we need to move very fast, especially when we have curveballs because of regulation, or sometimes it's not just because of regulation. Sometimes it's because we've identified a better way forward. So yeah, I mean, in short, I would say working with an agile methodology and having an amazing team have been life savers, but also being ready to pivot whenever you need to pivot. So not holding on too much to maybe your original vision, and being able to move quickly are key. And what we've seen happen is that sometimes a curveball comes. We have to navigate it, but then 6 months, 10 months, a year later, we can go back to where we wanted to be in the first place because maybe the regulation changed. So as you said, in both the cannabis industry and the Bitcoin industry, things are changing so fast that whatever was true last year is no longer true this year. And that can be a good thing or a bad thing. But even in the worst case scenarios, if you can pivot quickly, then that's how you survive. I mean, so far it's worked for us.
For sure, and we know firsthand about the challenges you had to deal with, both from market trends. Bitcoin was 20,000 5 minutes ago. Now it's 62,000 now. You've had to change partnerships. You've partnered with some people and those partnerships have changed. And certain technologies have been enabled that have liberated some things, but at the same time have regulated. If you could tell me a story about what was the biggest curveball that you have had to deal with, and how the team in an agile format has been able to adapt to that, I think that would be a great story.
Say that again. I lost you for a sec. Could you repeat the question?
Sure. So I guess for the audience, it would be great to listen to a story about the biggest curveball you've had to deal with. It can be from a partnership standpoint, new technology, regulatory standpoint, market trends, even consumer fears. Which has been the biggest curveball you have to deal with, and how did your team deal with that quickly?
Wow, that's a heavy question. The first one I can think of, and maybe it was not the biggest curveball, but the first one I thought of was dealing with um, Apple and the App Store. In October 2022, um, the Apple changed their terms and conditions for the App Store, and suddenly they required every Bitcoin wallet or Bitcoin exchange and any cryptocurrency overall, not just for Bitcoin, wallet and exchange to provide necessary licenses for each country that the app was available in. And this was very frustrating because Apple is not a regulator, and I understand why they might do the things they do, but it's very frustrating when, you know, obviously we do things by the book, and we have a legal team and legal counsel that tells us what we can't and guides us into what we can't and what we can do in each country, because the legislation and the regulatory landscape in each varies country by country. But it's very frustrating when you have like a big brother sort of company that wants to play this big brother role or this regulatory role when they're not a regulator, because then you create this um, like head-on conflict where our legal team is telling us that what we're doing is allowed, and then somebody in India who's reviewing our app store, who knows nothing about Latin America, nothing about the law, nothing about Bitcoin, is telling us that unless we have a license, we can't have the app available in Guatemala, for example. Guatemala, there is no licenses for Bitcoin exchanges or crypto exchanges. So that was very frustrating. At one point, we managed to, through legal opinions, to which were obviously very expensive for us to be getting legal opinions just to please Apple. I think that was the most frustrating thing, that we needed to please Apple, not a regulatory body. Um, and we managed to open up again the app in two countries at the beginning, Guatemala and the US. Um, but then we were afraid that this was going to get harder and harder. So one of the things we did, again pivoting quickly, was to create a progressive web app, a PWA, that you can install in a Android and an iOS device, but this was mainly targeted for iOS users because of this headache with Apple. Um, so, yeah, so one of the things we did was create a PWA so that people could install or effectively install an iOS app into their device without going through the App Store. Um, yeah, but again, that was only possible because we have an amazing team, and we were ready and able to move and pivot quickly.
Thank you, Piero. And it's no small feat at all what you were able to do in terms of pivoting, because receiving, as you say, limits from a non-regulatory body, but rather just Apple saying you cannot operate in one of your biggest markets. It was great to see how we were able to lead the team through changing to a PWA system in the States, and how to also present those legal assets to Apple team that now allow you to operate in other countries in a way that those headaches are in the past. So congrats on that, Piero. Arthur, now moving on to you. So two questions, Arthur. Can you tell us a little bit more about Cannabolt's innovative payment and reward system for the cannabis stores, and how you were able to navigate those same curveballs that we were discussing with Piero, which are very difficult being in a Bitcoin industry and in a cannabis industry in the same time?
Yeah, it's especially challenging in two highly regulated industries. Regarding Cannabolt and its rewards and payments, we are actually placing, as a manufacturer, we're placing uh, Bitcoin rewards on our products. So there'll be a QR code on all of our products, and a consumer can scan the code, download the app, and we'll beam them Satoshis, or little pieces of Bitcoin. And that's for folks that aren't familiar with Bitcoin. They're able to get their first taste and in our view is give and you shall receive. And so we want to give it away to get people interested, get people involved. And we love Bitcoin. We have it on our balance sheet, and we think that it's much better than points. Points are fine. It's a way to track how you're doing, your loyalty as a customer. But ultimately, your reward is some kind of free product. With our company, we're still giving people free products as they get to a certain amount of points, but the points is universal money. The points are now Bitcoin. They're not just some number on a somewhere. This is something that if the customer wishes, they can withdraw their Bitcoin and spend it somewhere else or put it into savings account. Data on the payments side. Once we get our customers used to receiving rewards and moving it around, we're going to open up payments at our dispensaries so that a customer can buy Bitcoin and use it to purchase products. And that will be built on the Lightning Network, which allows transactions to be instantaneous. In the cannabis sector especially, this is really useful because transactions are extremely high. They're about 10% per transaction. So the customer is already burdened with buying cannabis in a taxed environment. The taxes on cannabis are high. Then they're burdened with this new sort of extremely high percentage rate. And most of the times they're buying with cash and they have to withdraw from ATMs. So utilizing network to simply scan a QR and buy the product and then get rewarded coin is a real it's a value customers. In it, where Cannabolt will be working invoice our business transaction. So we'll do about dollars of sales wholesale this year on the invoices. Hey, pay and want to, and can offer that service. So it's we're going to prove this as a business this year, build it into our operations, and the goal is to have start with Connecticut and have hopefully every single cannabis company in Connecticut on Cannabolt, and we also have licenses in New York, and so we can bridge into New York as well to expand Cannabolt. On the regulatory side, one of the ways that we've been able to kind of navigate through the gray area is we've been working with Breeze, which is a non-custodial coin wallet. We've also been working with on our treasury side for Bitcoin, where we store the Bitcoin before we deliver it to our customers. We've been working with River, who has a payment processor license in Connecticut. So piggybacking off of their license helps us. It's a tremendous partnership, and they've been fantastic to work with. And I think it goes back to kind of the Osmo strategy, which is draw the line in the sand on Bitcoin. And when you do that, you have other partners who are also Bitcoin only, like Breeze or like River, and they can trust you because we're using a trustworthy money. And so it really helps when you bring those partnerships together through Bitcoin. And with regards to regulations, when there's a will, there's a way. You just got to keep working through it and pivot and iterate as much as possible.
Thank you, Arthur. Thank you for that answer. That was great. Now I have a question, and I'll let any one of you jump into this. One of the main tenets of Agile is quick feedback loops, where you're getting feedback from your customer base, right? And one of the things that I find that is very difficult in the Bitcoin world is that before the ETF, a lot of big media was saying, crypto is the big bad wolf. You can lose your money overnight, or you can have a lot, but it's scary having your money there. Just stick to the traditional banking system where everything is going to be fine. And after the ETF was launched into the market, I think that's changed a lot. Can you tell us about how difficult it has been for you guys as entrepreneurs to evangelize people with those strong market trends that before used to say to people, Bitcoin is dangerous, and now that the ETF is out there and things have quieted down, how difficult has it been to evangelize people on these aspects of Bitcoin?
I have a lot to say on this front, but actually, before I start, I'd like to hear what Art has to say, because obviously the US is very different from being in Latin America, and the work we have to do to evangelize people in Latin America is totally different from the US. But Art, want to start with your thoughts on this?
Yeah, definitely. So
Being
in the US, we've got SBF, we've got all these kind of horror stories with different entrepreneurs that have unfortunately used this amazing invention of Bitcoin to create their own coins and defraud the public. But recently, I think because of the adoption of Wall Street with the ETFs, the adoption of businesses, a lot of leaders like Michael Saylor, Elon Musk, who have put Bitcoin on their balance sheet, just to name a few. I think that the education and the adoption and ability of Bitcoin is starting to reach the point where um, it's sort of like iPhones. I think early on there's a group of people that are adopting it, using it, Apple computers, laptops, MacBooks. Eventually, it will become. I think also the price is kind of the selling point for Bitcoin. You've got this tremendous success over the last 2 years, and this is with a tremendous amount of forced selling from SBF and the bankruptcies involved in that, as well as Grayscale, the forced selling from their fund, which will end soon. And so, I think that as the halving occurs and as the price continues to appreciate, while in the face of kind of a global uncertainty, there's the adoption is going to be exceptionally aggressive to the point where you may see people scrambling to try and get whatever they can. So that you gotta in the Bitcoin world, you gotta have some foresight. You got to think in the future, and so we think that this is going to be an asset where in 2 years, a lot of people are going to be like, "Wow, how did I not see this coming?" Because it's going to be connected to so much in the financial industry and global finance. So anyway, I think that it's happening. You have to stay positive. You have to stay cheerful. And our approach to this is let's give it away. Let's reward people in Bitcoin so that they don't have to take the risk of their own dollar to buy it. We're going to give it to you, and let's see how you like it. And so I think I think that's a great approach. Rewards is a great way to start if you're in my business.
Thank you, Art. That was great. Piero?
So how do we go about teaching them about Bitcoin and how this is a superior money because nobody else can print more of? But also by understanding the nuances in each country. The way you explain Bitcoin to somebody in Argentina is very different to the way you explain Bitcoin to somebody in Mexico who might need to receive a remittance from their family member who migrated to Texas. And it's very different from the way you explain to somebody in El Salvador, where the average credit card transaction cost or the cost to accept credit card transactions in your business can cost up to 10% per transaction. The average is 4.5%, but depending on their industry, it can be up to 10%, similar to the cannabis industry in the United States. So when you explain this to people, Bitcoin can solve different problems. Again, it can solve and protect you from inflation in a country that is going through hyperinflation. And then you change the narrative to focus on that. It can save you hundreds of thousands of dollars in credit card processing fees in countries where credit card processing fees are really high. And the same with, it can save you a lot of money in countries that need to receive cross-border transfers. So yes, Bitcoin is volatile, on the daily, but in long periods of time, Bitcoin has proven to be the best asset in terms of investment assets in the last 10 years.
Agree. Thank you, Piero, for that. And I have a question that piggybacks on this question before. And the question is, what is the main aha moment or the main aha use case for both Cannabolt and for Osmo? That is the turning point where users grab your application or grab your use case and say, this is awesome. This is innovation. This is the next step. And they get hooked on your product. If you can mention one of those aha moments, what would it be? Piero, can we get started with you?
Sure. There's several, but one of the aha moments is the fact that in Central America, we don't have a stock market. And in most Latin American countries, we don't have a local stock market. And investing in US stocks, let's say somebody wants to invest their money and buy an Apple stock or a fraction of an Apple stock, that's very, very hard to do. And it's very exclusive to people that are wealthy, because usually you need between $5,000 and $20,000 as a minimum to open an account with a broker in the US, being a foreigner. So really, the vast majority of the population doesn't have investment avenues. They can only keep the money in the bank, which with inflation and with the fees of maintenance, account maintenance fees that banks usually charge, you're actually losing money, not making money by having your money in the bank. So that's not really an investment strategy. And again, you can't really invest in stocks. You can invest in real estate, but the vast majority of the population doesn't have enough money to invest in real estate. So what do? You essentially have to keep your money in the couch or under your bed, or buying gold is very hard. And that's pretty much it, or have the money in the bank. So one of the aha moments, and the reason most users are using us now at an Osmo, is because you can buy as little as $1 worth of Bitcoin. So people prefer, and obviously we're democratizing this investments in a way to people that had historically been excluded from the financial service sector and had not been able to invest their money, and now they can start with as little as $1. So I'd say, I can talk about many other aha moments and use cases and problems we're solving, but I would say that's the main one right now.
Thank you, Piero. Agree 100% with your answer. Arthur, can you tell us about the aha moments for your customer base when they use your product, and when do they get hooked, or when do they buy into the idea?
Yeah, so we'll have two customers ultimately, cannabis consumers, and then also cannabis companies. And for the companies, it's actually interesting. Piero's explanation for Osmo, it's kind of similar in a way. The cannabis companies they can't hire a broker to put their cash in the stock market. That broker can't work with them. They can't use a national bank to keep their cash. And right now, with the money supplies Piero mentioned, money supply is increasing. The U.S. is printing. Cannabis companies have no choice but to keep their cash in cash, and so and they're watching the value of that cash melt away. And so, how do you store your value as a business? The only way that we can think of is you create a corporate treasury in Bitcoin. Otherwise, you're forced to try and grow the business when it's not the best for you to grow. The best idea is to operate in a or two highly regulated, other regulated. You only get a census. Cannabis companies are buying new cannabis, and they're taking on. They're using their cash. These companies, the only way they can to utilize their cash. Otherwise, they have to distribute it to their investors. So our belief is that Cannabolt will help all these other cannabis businesses put their cash to better use by adopting a Bitcoin treasury strategy. And ultimately, they'll see their cash appreciate rather than melt away. As far as our consumers go, their aha moment is they don't have to go to the ATM anymore and pay those crazy fees. They don't have to go through an awkward third party for a debit card transaction where they have to get cash back at the end so that the dispensary can make believe it was an ATM transaction. All those things amount to huge fees. We can finally take the cannabis industry and make it as easy as ordering food on Uber Eats. And that's the aha moment. And we can only do that because of Bitcoin, because it's built on Bitcoin, because the other banking relationships that you have don't let you make this as simple as Uber. And so that's when the consumer, I think, realizes, okay, it's because of Bitcoin that I can do this.
That's great. Agree, Arthur. Thank you for that. Now we're reaching the last question, which is also my favorite question. And as a final question, let's look to the future. So, Piero and Arthur, as your companies continue to innovate, where do you envision the future of Bitcoin in the next 5 years? And how is that going to shape your project? Where is your project going to be in the next 5 years if everything comes to plan, which we know things change over time, right? But how do you see the future? Piero, let's go with you first.
Wow, the future is pretty hard to predict, but considering the things we're seeing in the macroeconomic landscape, and considering that the United States is endlessly printing dollars through the Federal Reserve, I only see the price of Bitcoin going up. And if we consider that the monetary policy of Bitcoin is a fixed supply that decreases every 4 years, um, meaning Bitcoin becomes scarcer every 4 years, then, by simple math, and also if you consider that right now about 1% of the population has Bitcoin, and the price of Bitcoin is at about $65,000, then if 2% of the population is adopts Bitcoin, then just by simple math, the price should double to about $130,000. So, right now, in terms of Bitcoin adoption, there's at about the same amount of people that had access to the internet in 1998 have access to Bitcoin today. And in 1998, we had no idea how big the internet was going to be and how much it was going to impact us and change our lives drastically. And I think in a very similar way, we have no idea the way Bitcoin is going to impact us in the future. But in the short term, in the next 5 years, I think the U.S. is still going to be printing more dollars, and it's still going to be devaluing everybody's savings in dollar or in local currencies that are pegged to the dollar. And more people are going to be adopting Bitcoin. So if you add all of those things up, the simple answer is the price of Bitcoin is going to continue going up.
Thank you, Pedro. And what does Osmo as a product look like in the next years?
So right now, as I mentioned at the beginning of the call, we are focusing on being your trusted, easiest to use, and cheapest way to buy Bitcoin, your trusted Bitcoin app. But as we continue growing, we anticipate that we'll be offering a lot more financial services that traditionally only the banking sector had offered. So, we're very proudly not a bank and we have no intentions of becoming a bank. But in a way, we want to become something of a banking alternative where you can get loans by depositing your Bitcoin into Osmo and using your Bitcoin as collateral. This is one of the products that we'll be launching. But just to give you an idea and give the audience an idea of what I mean by offering other type of financial services besides local and cross-border transfers and besides, investment avenues, but um, also being able to get a loan. So right now, if you have a house and you need cash, you usually go to the bank and mortgage your house and you get cash in exchange, using your house as collateral. If you don't pay the loan, then the bank keeps your house. So with Bitcoin, we can do something similar because Bitcoin is an asset and it's a scarce asset where you can go to us at Osmo, or you will be able to go to us at Osmo in the near future and use your Bitcoin as collateral in order to get a loan. I don't need to do a credit check. I don't need to uh, ask you for much information because I'm using your Bitcoin as collateral. Once you finish paying the loan, we give you your Bitcoin back. And if you don't pay the loan, then we keep your Bitcoin. But again, we're the, democratizing access to financial services because historically in places like Latin America where you don't have a credit scoring or credit scoring at all or credit history, it's very hard for people that have been excluded from the financial service ecosystem to get access to financial services like loans. But if you have a little bit of Bitcoin, you'll be able to use it as collateral. So obviously, I can spend hours talking about all of the things we have planned for the next 5 years, but I would say that's the short answer.
Thank you, Piero. And to finalize with you, is Agile and Flutter going to be a part of that 5 year strategy for the future? And if yes, why?
Definitely, Agile is something that as I mentioned earlier, it allows us to pivot and move quickly, and I think that will it's required today, and it'll be required in 5 years as well. And Flutter right now, as it is, it's amazing. Obviously, it has its limitations, but I've seen a lot of other companies, including companies like Nubank, building on Flutter, and I just expect this to grow and to be more robust and more modular than it is today. So I don't see why we would change from using Flutter to using anything else if, like Bitcoin, it gets better with adoption. I think Flutter will only get better and more robust with adoption as well. So yeah.
Thank you, Piero. So Art, back to you. What does the next 5 years look like for the Bitcoin and cannabis industry? In 5 years, where do you see Cannabolt? And tell us about that future.
In 5 years, where Cannabolt an option single world reward their customer and to accept payment. That's our see that in 5 years. It goes. My
Sorry, Arthur,
Oh,
you're cutting a bit out. Is it okay if you can turn off your camera? Maybe we can hear you better. Thank you.
can you guys hear me now?
A lot better. Thank you.
Oh, great. Yeah. So for Cannabolt, we'd love to be a tool in every dispensary um, within the next 5 years. A tool that will allow them to reward customers in Bitcoin and also allow to medium of exchange for Bitcoin in the cannabis space. And I think with our team here at Singular, we can make that happen. On the Bitcoin side, where I see this going, and I think one Bitcoin in 5 years will be the equivalent of buying a beautiful home. It'll be the equivalent of owning a gorgeous home. See the price being anywhere between 100,000 US to $1 million US. And in the how it relates to the can that you mentioned before, it's very hard to get loans to buy anything because of the restriction. So, I think Rodeo Cannabis Company I own, our goal 100 is by them. And so hopefully we'll just be one of many cannabis companies that is sort of leading the way, showing others. And Cannabolt is, it's going to help facilitate the purchase of those Bitcoins, but showing others how to do it. And so, I think the companies that adopt a Bitcoin treasury are going to be immensely successful. The CEOs are going to be proven right. And, I see it being a pristine asset in 5 years. And ultimately, I think, Flutter, it's kind of, I think Piero nailed it. The flexibility you have with Flutter, the ability to change quickly, I think is so key. It's a universal language that has been really helpful for our team. And Agile is sort of a definition of an entrepreneur. You have to iterate and, iterate every day. It's part of the lifestyle. Pivot whenever you need to stay alive and thrive. And so we're never going to stop that. I think that you have to, if you're an entrepreneur, you have to constantly adopt that strategy. And just want to thank you, Sebastian, because the Singular team has been incredibly helpful in helping Cannabolt, build its vision. So thank you and your whole team for all the work you've done for us.
Thank you, Arthur, and thank you for that insight into the future. Guys, one of the things that we've heard time and time again in Silicon Valley is you not only invest in the idea, you invest in the people. And both of you guys are great CEOs that have led your teams and your product through different market changes, regulatory changes. And for me, that's the hallmark of a great entrepreneur, which is resilience. So congratulations on that. We're going to open up to questions from the audience, which we thank a lot for coming here today. And we have a question. We have two questions. I'll ask the first one to Piero, and then I'll ask the second one to Art, so that we have enough time. So Piero, with you, can you tell us more about the halving that's upcoming, and what would you say to entrepreneurs and consumers as a recommendation to make the most of this halving opportunity?
Well, you're running out of time. The halving is going to happen either in 3 days or in 4 days, and it's not well. But before I start with that, as I mentioned, Bitcoin is scarce. There's only 21 million Bitcoin that will ever exist. And the monetary policy of Bitcoin has been pre-written in its code. And the way it works is that every 4 years, the supply of new Bitcoins out of those 21 million that will ever exist, or they don't all exist right now, only about 19 million of those 21 million are in circulation today. And today, about 900 new Bitcoin come into circulation. And after April 20th, give or take, it could happen on April 19 or it could happen early on April 20th, the amount of Bitcoin that comes into circulation will be halved or cut in half, meaning that 450 Bitcoin will come into circulation every day for the next 4 years. And in 4 years, it's going to occur again. And instead of 450 a day, we'll have 225 a day, and so on and so forth, until we finish mining or the last Bitcoin comes into circulation, will take about 120 more years. So the last Bitcoin will finish being mined, or in other words, finish coming into circulation out of those 21 million Bitcoin in the year 2140, give or take. So the next halving occurs, as I said, in about 3 days. And what this means is that Bitcoin becomes more scarce, Again, not because there'll be less Bitcoin, there will always be 21 million Bitcoin, but the Bitcoin that we have access to on the daily basis becomes more constrained because the supply of new Bitcoins coming into circulation is cut in half.
Thank you, Piero. And then we'll be definitely purchasing more Bitcoin in the coming days in Osmo to make the most of that. So thank you for that. Now, Arthur, the last question for you. Claudia says, we all appreciate the many advantages of Bitcoin and all of its possibilities for different industries. However, she's curious to hear about what concerns there are as well. And the question is, what makes you nervous about the Bitcoin industry, and what challenges do you think we should be prepared for as we expand the use of Bitcoin, both as a personal use and a commercial use? That's a great question, Claudia.
Yeah, so what actually makes me nervous, and perhaps I'm a little too bullish, I imagine I am, but what actually makes me nervous about Bitcoin is the potential for an extreme price upward convexity in the very near future. I think that there's a possibility that it could get very expensive too quickly, and that there wouldn't be enough time for, I think, people to take advantage of adopting it earlier on. And so I think proceed with caution. Ease into your purchases, but as Piero mentioned, the supply on a daily basis is going to get cut in half in a few days. And so the forced selling, the miners who mine Bitcoin right now, it's a 900 a day. They're forced to sell essentially to pay their electricity bills, to pay their employees, and to take the profit if they choose to. Their forced selling is going to go from 900 a day, and it's going to be split in half. And so when that happens, you still have this immense amount of demand. You have the Hong Kong ETFs coming online. They expect about $25 billion worth of. You have the continued demand from the U.S., from Wall Street, and then I think you're gonna, as Piero mentioned, this demand of the average person, especially in the U.S., where we're starting to see inflation is hitting everybody's wallet to a point where it's it's just unsustainable, and their number one issue now is inflation and the money printing, whether it's Republican or Democrat. It's a big problem. And so I think the thing that makes me nervous is if the masses, the people who really need to protect themselves, because they don't control the printer, the people who don't have a tremendous amount of assets. I think that it would be a shame if they don't have the time to benefit by adopting early. It's really the people's money, and so I think I've told everybody I love, hey, before the halving, scoop up as much Bitcoin as you can. You have a nice little dip in the price because of geopolitical tensions. I'd take advantage of it if you're listening. and so that's my take on it. I think that the acceleration could happen than people think. So the timing is limited.
Thank you so much, Arthur. Thank you so much, Piero and Arthur. We reached the end of our panel. We'd love to have you on in the future, but to all the audience, I highly recommend you follow these two great entrepreneurs on their journey. Take a look at their products. They're definitely going to be industry changing, and I can't wait to see how they grow and progress in the next 5 years. And I'm glad to hear that Agile Flutter will be a big part of that. So a big hug to Piero, a big hug to Arthur, and anything you need, we're always here, okay? Have a great day. And thank you to the audience.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.